Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Spoken Greats podcast. Today, we will be looking at Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's one of my favorite books. I read it several times a year and have done for several years now. And every time I read it, I learn something new. So we're going to go through this book bit by bit together and see what we can learn. Today, I'm very happy to say I am drinking a 2018 Brunello di Montalcino from Bacini. So if you don't know, Brunello di Montalcino is a red wine produced in Tuscany. Montalcino is from the Siena province in Tuscany, so southern Tuscany. And it's made from 100% Sangiovese grape. Now, this wine is bloody beautiful. It is incredibly fruity, rich in red fruit, red cherry, plum, a little bit of spice, and it has incredible aging potential. Please let me know what you are drinking in the comments. I'm very happy today that I've got this with me. The aromas it gives off is just pure fruit. Incredible. It's beautiful. It's full of rich red fruit flavor. It's got a little bit of spice to it. It's got tannin, but it's quite silky tannins. It just goes down so nicely. It's a very well balanced red wine. It's a bit steeper in price. This was about £34 a bottle. I opened it the other night for Valentine's Day. Not your everyday drinking wine, but when you do open it, it's well worth the drink. Cheers. Bloody hell, that's good. Let's give a little bit of context to meditation, shall we? Who was Marcus Aurelius? Marcus Aurelius was Emperor of Rome during the 2nd century. Now, Rome at this time was still the superpower of the Mediterranean basin. The Roman Empire at this point stretches from northern Britain all the way across Europe till the Caucasus Mountains and along the stretch of North Africa up to the Atlantic Ocean. So it covers all of the Mediterranean basin. It reached its peak in the reign of Trajan at the beginning of the 2nd century. After Trajan, Hadrian succeeds him and decides that the empire at this point is too large. They can't afford to expand their territory anymore. So he starts consolidating the frontiers of the empire. So this is where he starts building Hadrian's Wall in the north of England, frontiers being set up along Germany, and also in what we'd today be known as Jordan and Syria. So he's trying to consolidate the empire to bring more stability to it because he realizes that it can't keep constantly expanding. Now, Hadrian fails to have a biological son, so he adopts Lucius Aelius as his successor to be emperor. Unfortunately, Lucius Aelius suffers from quite poor health and dies before Hadrian does. So next he adopts Antoninus Pius, and in order to assure the line of succession, he adopts Antoninus on the condition that he adopts both the son of Lucius Aelius and Marcus Aurelius, who is a grandson of a senator who was a close friend of Hadrian. And so this is what happens. Antoninus adopts Lucius Aelius and Marcus Aurelius, and when Hadrian dies, Antoninus becomes emperor, and then when he dies, Marcus Aurelius becomes emperor. Now, at this point, Marcus Aurelius has the right to total power over all of Rome. He is Caesar. His word is law. He can do whatever he wants. But immediately on becoming emperor in 161, he appoints his adopted brother as co-emperor. So he immediately tries to share the power of being emperor because Marcus doesn't want this power. In Meditations, he sees the being emperor as a duty that he has to do, but he would much rather spend his time reading books. He doesn't want to spend his time running the empire, but ultimately this is what he has to do. And in meditations, it's like a journal to himself because he has no one else to speak to. When you are the most powerful man in the world, everyone wants something from you, and they're never going to speak the truth to you. They're going to change the way they speak to you to try and initiate a certain result. And so he finds himself having to write to himself. Because the interesting thing about meditations is that it was never intended for publication. Marcus ordered that all his writings be burned after his death, and thankfully his servants never carried out that request. These are the personal writings that a man who was considered equivalent of a god wrote to himself to remind himself to be a good man. And Marcus Aurelius follows the philosophical teachings of Stoicism. Stoicism was a philosophical school which originated around the 3rd, 4th century BC in Greece, which was founded on the principles of detachment from the external and focusing on what is within your control and ignoring what is not. And the purpose of life is not pleasure, but rather virtue, to do good. And Hadrian, effectively the adopted grandfather of Marcus Aurelius, was a Grecophile. He was very interested in the Greeks, in their philosophy, in their writings, and he attended the school of Epictetus, a Greek Stoic philosopher in Greece. And he brought back tutors to Rome with him, and these tutors were used to teach Marcus Aurelius the principles of Stoicism. And this is something which he carries on throughout his life. So a little bit more about the book. It's divided into 12 parts, which are unconnected. They're like these short, pithy maxims which he wrote to himself. And you can just open it on any random page and dip in and out of it. You don't need to read it chronologically to appreciate it. And so it's quite easy reading. The most coherent book is book 1, because this focuses on gratitude. This is the one where Marcus talks the most about what he's thankful for and from whom. And so I'll try and give a little bit more context as and when I can in this. So from my grandfather Verus, decency and a mild temper. This is something that the Stoics talk about a lot, is the regulation of emotions throughout. And you can definitely understand why it would be important for someone like Marcus Aurelius to have a mild temper. Because when you have the power of life and death over everyone you meet, being able to control your temper literally saves lives. And so Marcus Aurelius constantly has to remind himself that the people around him are the way they are because they were born that way, and it's not their fault. And so he has to regulate his mood because he has the ability to kill anyone he meets. And a key tenet of Stoicism is temperance, so the restraint of excessive emotion. This includes fear, anger, lust, and gluttony. From what they say, and I remember of my natural father, integrity and manliness. So Marcus Aurelius's natural father dies quite early on in his life, which is why he talks of second-hand knowledge of what they say of his natural father. Manliness here refers to the Roman concept of manliness, which is the Latin word virtus, or virtue. So to be manly was to be a man of truth, to be a man of principle. So this included courage, excellence, valor, and self-control. From my mother, piety, generosity, the avoidance of wrongdoing, and even the thought of it. Also, simplicity of living, clear of the habits of the rich. So piety is an interesting one because you may think of it in the sense of going to a temple or a church and praying to the gods, etc. The Stoics teach that to be at one with nature or to be at one with the gods is to do good and do all that is according with nature. And so, at least my interpretation of this, piety here really translates to doing what is nature with the gods, so doing what is good. Generosity too. When Marcus Aurelius became emperor, he immediately gave out double the usual bonus to the Praetorian Guard, the imperial guard. And he also distributed incredibly lavish expense to the Roman people, so much so that he devalued the Roman currency. The avoidance of wrongdoing and even the thought of it. Now, this one is a very interesting one, because as I've already said, the Emperor of Rome is effectively a god. He can do anything he wants. He can kill anyone he wants. He can have sex with anyone he wants. He can drink as much as he wants. He can eat the most lavish food all day at no consequence whatsoever. Not too dissimilar to modern society in that sense. I think it's relatable in that you can have as much casual sex as you want. These days, you have an unlimited amount of calories which you can consume. There are so many different vices now which are so much easier in modern society. And for most of the past, only the exceedingly wealthy were exposed to such levels of temptation. Whereas now, it hits most of us. And so how Marcus dealt with this temptation is always a very interesting thing to look at, because the exercise of self-restraint, when there is no one to restrain you, is an incredibly remarkable strength of character, I think. And to stay well clear of the habits of the rich. Now, when you already have all the money in the known world, the idea of gaining more riches loses its value. From my great-grandfather not to have attended schools for the public, to have had good teachers at home, and to realise that this is the sort of thing on which one should spend lavishly. That's not really changed, has it? That's a consistent complaint throughout history, is how awful the public education system is. It's not that there's no value in education itself, but rather the one that is produced en masse is incredibly inadequate. And no expense should be spared on learning. And this is the beautiful thing today, that it's easier than ever to learn and educate yourself on whatever it is that you want to learn about. From my tutor, not to become a green or blue supporter at the races, or side with the lights or heavies in the amphitheatre. So what Marcus is talking about here is what today we now know as professional sports. At the time of ancient Rome, people would go to the Circus Maximus, which was a arena for chariot racing. It was huge. It had a capacity of about 150,000. It's like it was the ancient world's NASCAR or Formula One, or modern horse racing, if you like. But it had with it the fanaticism of football. If you think of European ultras or hooligans in many football clubs, in the same way that at the chariot races, they were divided into the Greens team and the Blues team. And regularly, there used to be catastrophic riots in Rome between supporters of the Greens or the Blues. And in the same way, with the gladiator battles in the Colosseum or other amphitheatres, you'd have the lights or the heavies. So the lights would be these lightly armed gladiators, such as the retiarii, they'd have a trident and a net, or some other combination. And then you'd have the secutor, which is like a heavily armed gladiator who would have armour, who would have a sword and shield. And people would back different sides. And again, fights would break out between the supporters of both sides. And Marcus greatly appreciates what a waste of time this was. And again, you can see it in modern sports, how much time people dedicate to following the ins and outs of professional sports, down to the point of the most pointless stats about this player or that player. And they know not just the Premier League, they know what's going on in the Championship, in the European clubs. They know they're following the Sunday League. And all of this time is being dedicated to sports, which could have been taken up by something else. And not only is it considered a distraction here, it's considered a sort of outsourcing of your emotion. If you look at the Stoic principle of focusing on what's in your control and what isn't, whether someone wins a sports game is not within your control. And so if your happiness is based on whether your sports team wins today, then you have outsourced your happiness to someone else. To tolerate pain and feel few needs, to work with my own hands and mind my own business, to be deaf to malicious gossip. So pain is considered a natural part of life. This is not something unique to Stoicism. Even the Buddhists say life is suffering. To feel few needs, this goes back to the principle of limiting the conditions for a happy life. Because the more conditions you set out that you require in order to be happy, the less likely it is that will actually happen. And because the number of things that you can want are infinite. And so you can keep trying to fulfill them, but you will be forever chasing it. You'll never quite get there. Whereas you can scale back your wants. You can decide to do that today, and you have already achieved what you wanted. This is not to be nihilist, merely to accept that the horizon is always a step away. And so to limit your needs to start with saves the journey time. To quote Epicurus, a man is rich when he says he has enough. And even as emperor here recognizes the importance of doing work himself. He's not immune to getting his hands dirty. And also, he's conscious of the malicious gossip going on in the imperial court. This is a place where people are constantly scheming to discredit each other so they can maneuver into a better social status. Now, if someone's the kind of person to gossip, they're sharing something with you about someone else. Guess what? They are also doing the same about you when you're not there. From Diogenes, to avoid empty enthusiasms, to disbelieve all that is talked by miracle mongers and quacks about incantations, exorcism of demons, and the like. So Marcus has a very low tolerance for bullshit. This is in an incredibly superstitious society which believed in good omens or prophecies, and you get the vibe that he was not someone that was waiting to hear his horoscopes. Not to hold quail fights or be excited by such sports. So this is what I go back to with the chariot racing and the gladiator battles. This kind of shallow entertainment is a distraction from your life's work and fulfilling your purpose. To tolerate plain speaking. As the absolute ruler of Rome, people naturally would be afraid to speak the truth to Marcus. You'd have reports coming in from all the provinces of the empire, and you ask them, how's the empire going? Oh, it's going great, Your Majesty. Thanks for asking. Everything's super. Everybody loves you. We've built all those things you wanted us to build. We've had zero problems with uprisings, and everything's golden. And many emperors did just this folly. They surrounded themselves with yes men, and they didn't want to hear the truth. But it seems here that Marcus did support people just telling him as it was, and he preferred it. Stoicism is a much more practical philosophy in that sense. It doesn't really concern itself with the abstract of, are we really in a simulation? Or it's not like the sophists where they get bogged down in trying to make clever literary devices. And, oh, I said this thing, don't I sound clever? It was very much a system for living and practical use rather than intended to be just old rich guys mentally masturbating to each other. to have an affinity for philosophy and to attend the lectures first of Bacchius, then of Tadasus and Marcianus, to write essays from a young age, to love the camp bed, the hide blanket, and all else involved in the Greek training. So here Marcus talks about his youth where he was trained classically in Greek philosophy, particularly in Stoicism. And here he talks about the Stoics would often practice poverty. So they would practice sleeping on the floor and just having simple meals of eating bread and drinking water and just sleeping on a simple camp bed. And it was to instill the fact that your needs can be incredibly simple and life can provide everything that you require of it at any time. You merely need to scale back what it is that you require. And further into that, by practicing poverty, it removes that fear of someone can take away all of your property, they can exile you to somewhere else, to some godforsaken place that's an incredibly rough, inhospitable place to live, and you can still live a good life there. It does not prevent you from living a good life. Now, you may be thinking, this is all well and good, but many of these philosophers were just rich men, I hear you say, and Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, so it's easy for him to practice living this rough lifestyle because he knows at the end of the day he's in his palace. You could say that, but one of the biggest teachings of Stoicism which influenced Marcus Aurelius was that of Epictetus. Now, the interesting thing about Epictetus was that he was a slave. He was at the polar opposite end of Roman society and yet still practiced exactly the same principles, which demonstrates really that it is an equally applicable philosophy to all, for at the bottom and the top of society, no one is excluded from it. From Rusticus to grasp the idea of wanting correction and treatment for my character. So you see how humble this guy is. He's trying to correct his behavior at all times. Someone who's literally being called a god is wrestling with the idea of improving himself because he knows he's a flawed individual and he has stuff to work on. Not to be diverted into a taste for rhetoric, so not writing up my own speculations, delivering my own little moral sermons, or presenting a glorified picture of the ascetic or the philanthropist. So again, he's not caring about the ceremony of grand speeches or sounding articulate. And he's not preaching as well. Whilst he's working on trying to be a good man, he's not lecturing to others about, hey, look at you. He's leading by example rather than lecturing people, to keep clear of speechifying, versifying, and pretentious language, nor to walk around at home in ceremonial dress, or do anything else like that. Now, this is incredibly remarkable when you read about the batshit crazy stuff that Roman emperors used to do, like Caligula or Nero, calling themselves the human reincarnation of Jupiter, or making their horse the consul. It's all well and good from the comfort of modern society, where you're kept in check by law and order and also public shame, to say, oh yeah, all this stuff is pretty obvious. Is it that obvious when you have no one stopping you from doing it, though? If you had no limitations on what you were allowed to do, no one could stop you, no one could say anything, would you still have the same self-restraint? I know I wouldn't. I don't know if anyone would. To write letters in an unaffected style, like his own letter written to my mother from Sunesa. So again, he's talking about don't use exaggerations, don't use over-emotive language which exaggerates how bad or good a situation is. Look at things as they are and speak plainly, write plainly about them. Epictetus has a great quote on using plain language. So a student comes to him and brags about having recently read the complete works of Chrysippus, who was another Stoic writer, and that he understood all of it. And the student expects Epictetus to be impressed by that. But Epictetus simply replies, if Chrysippus had been a better writer, you'd have less to brag about. And this is a common thing you'll see with many philosophers. They make their work incredibly inaccessible because they wrap up their work in needlessly convoluted speech in these complex linguistic structures that when you're reading it, you think, what the fuck are they on about? And it makes it incredibly detached from reality. Thinking, how on earth are you supposed to take any teaching from it? It's not to say that there is no wisdom to be found in such works, but there is a purity, a sophistication in simplicity. If you are able to explain things concisely and in as few words as possible, not only does it make you more understandable, but it just communicates your ideas much more effectively. And I think that's why the Stoics are in favor of such simplistic language whenever possible, to be readily recalled to conciliation with those who have taken or given offence, just as soon as they themselves are willing to turn back. Throughout the book, you'll see that Marcus exercises an empathy with people, one of mercy and forgiveness, that he understands that people don't have control over the way they are. It's in their nature to be that way. And so he reconciles himself to forgive people whenever he is able to do, because ultimately we are all part of humanity living together on this planet. And he sees it as part of his living in accordance with nature to reconcile with his fellow human beings. And I think that's advice we can all take on board. It's better to make peace than war. And that's, I feel like that's such a throwaway cliche thing to say, but it is. It's often the harder route to take to extend an olive branch to someone. But ultimately, we all make mistakes. And if you think about when you offend someone, when we speak, our speech is like a condensed form of our thoughts. Maybe it only conveys 5% of what we're thinking in our heads. And then that speech then goes to someone else. And then that gets translated into their brain and then into their thoughts. And then their response goes through that same process. And so our communication with each other is constantly flawed. And I think we're lacking a bit of empathy towards each other these days in terms of taking offense from one another. To read carefully, not satisfied with my own superficial thoughts or quick to accept the facile views of others. So this is one that I'm trying to go back to, is the importance of reading. We live in a 24-hour news cycle these days where most of what we're exposed to is not information, it's opinion. And we're listening to the half-baked opinion of people on topics we don't really understand, and we're told we should think X or Y, and the path of least resistance is to go along with that consensus. It's very rare that we take the time to reflect on things in depth and read extensively about them, because most of other people's opinions is based on what they've seen in the news, or they've seen some commentator make a quick take on something and they've copied that view. It's very rare that people come to things of their own reflection on the matter. And the only way to do that is to read extensively, because even your own thoughts are going to be subjected to that superficial process of, you will react to events, and often emotionally, or you'll copy the first few things. And to be original and to produce your own thoughts on something, you need to have a thorough understanding of the topic, and that can only come from reading. To have encountered the discourses of Epictetus, to which he introduced me with his own copy. So as I've already introduced you to Epictetus was very influential on Marcus Aurelius. And there's 3 Stoics who survived to modern day, whose writings survived to modern day. So that's Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. In that chronological order, Seneca was around in the mid-1st century AD during the reign of Nero. And then Epictetus comes later during the reign of Trajan and Hadrian. So Epictetus chronologically much closer to Marcus Aurelius. And as I was saying earlier about Hadrian even attending some of Epictetus's lectures in Greece, his teachings are quite influential on Marcus Aurelius. From Apollonius, moral freedom, the certainty to ignore the dice of fortune and have no other perspective, even for a moment, than that of reason alone. So moral freedom goes back to the Stoic principles of temperance and self-control. Ultimately, if you cannot control your emotions, then you are a slave to them. And so if you let yourself be consumed by anger or fear or lust or greed, then you are not free. You are acting to the impulses of these emotions. And so moral freedom here is talking about having the ability to master these emotions and ignoring the dice of fortune. I think this is a good point here in that if you are ambivalent to luck, either good luck or bad luck, you can be grateful when good luck happens, but you shouldn't attribute anything to it because luck is not something that we have control over. And so to try and look for a deeper meaning behind luck, I think is the undoing of a lot of people. To leave things to luck is to outsource your agency to act on things. And so it's also being irrational. And a key tenet of Stoicism is acting on reason and being rational. To always be the same man, unchanged in sudden pain, in the loss of a child, in lingering sickness. To see clearly in his living example that a man can combine intensity and relaxation. So this is a lesson that Marcus had to learn the hard way because he had about 14 children, and of those, I believe about 8 died before him. And he was regularly accustomed to losing children, and he also suffered from quite poor health. No, it's not that he is talking about being unaffected emotionally by these things. Marcus Aurelius was greatly affected by the death of his children and of his wife, and he did exercise emotion. He wasn't a robot. He wept for the death of his wife. What he's talking here is to be consistent in your actions. And so your circumstances do not give you a free pass in terms of your duties. And in his case, to be a good man, suffering tragedy does not give you an excuse to abandon your duties. And as emperor, he can't take a day off from being emperor. Not to be impatient in explanation. So a common refrain that Marcus Aurelius has is that you should either tolerate a man or teach him. And if you see someone doing an action which is wrong, then you should educate him on what is right, because he believes that human beings don't knowingly do wrong. And if you think about this, no one sees himself as the villain. People don't do things because they believe they are wrong. They do it because they are right, and they use their own sort of justification for doing so. And he's talking here about having the patience to explain things to people and educate them on their shortcomings. The observance of a man who clearly regarded as the least of his gifts his experience and skill in communicating his philosophical insights. So this is something that Marcus talks about later as well, in that Marcus never officially calls himself a Stoic or even a philosopher, really. He's more concerned in being a good human and fulfilling his duty of being a good man to his fellow human. He often criticizes himself for spending so much time in his books and writing about philosophy and to just act on it. no more writing about what it means to be a good man. Just go out and do it. And so by regarding that his philosophical insights as of all the gifts he has as the least important, I think it's an interesting lesson to take from Apollonius here. The lesson of how to take apparent favours from one's friends, neither compromised by them nor insensitive in their rejection. This is a difficult skill to balance. Socrates says that the worst death you can die is the inability to return in kind benefits received. So not being able to repay someone. But ultimately, you have to recognize the generosity of others. We live constantly in the grace of others' generosity. And most people we will never repay, not even a fraction of the kindness that they have given to us. The best we can do is pay it forward to someone else and keep it going. And that's probably the best anyone can do. And I would argue that you can't be compromised by true kindness, because if you are compromised by someone's kindness, then it wasn't real kindness. If they had some ulterior motive where they sought to gain some sort of influence over you or some other thing, then it wasn't true kindness. And so that's where I would disagree, but what do I know? And I think in the case of Marcus, there would have been a lot of people who would seek to influence him. And it's worthless giving anything to the man who has everything. And so I imagine he would have had to reject gifts quite often. And so to be able to do that in a way which recognized the good spirit and the good intentions behind someone's gift towards him, whilst also doing it gracefully, must be quite a difficult thing to do. From Sextus, a kindly disposition and the pattern of a household governed by the paterfamilias. The paterfamilias was the father of the household, the patriarch. In the Roman family system, the patriarch, the father, would be in charge of the household. The concept of life lived according to nature, an unaffected dignity, intuitive concern for his friends, tolerance both of ordinary people and of the emptily opinionated. Again, here he's talking about mixing with people from a lower class, and which as an emperor would be unthinkable, but he has tolerance for this. And opinions are like arseholes. Everyone has them and they stink. There are a lot of people who have half-baked opinions on things, and you have to humour them. You can't go to war on people's opinions, which they may have formed in 30 seconds of thinking on something. And yeah, you have to suffer fools gladly to a certain extent. Otherwise, you won't get very far. An agreeable manner with all, so that the pleasure of his conversation was greater than any flattery, and his very presence brought him the highest respect from all the company. If you're able to remain civil with people and be agreeable, if they're rude to you, it reflects more on that person than it does on you, and not sinking to their level of conversation, I think, is the more adult approach. And as a result, people will respect you more. Certainty of grasp and method in a discovery and organization of the essential principles of life. This can be summed up by to do what is necessary. Never to give the impression of anger or any other passion, but to combine complete freedom from passion with the greatest human affection, to praise without fanfare, and to wear great learning lightly. This is the myth about Stoicism, where people say, Stoics are a bunch of robots and they don't have emotions. Notice here he talks about with the greatest human affection, but he's also combining it with without passion. So there's an essence there of exercising platonic love for your fellow human without succumbing to lust. And this is something especially relevant, I think, for Marcus because of the position he's in, where he is able to act on his impulses at any point, but he chooses not to. To praise without fanfare. I think it is giving credit where credit is due, but not in a way that exaggerates what people have done or elevates them beyond a certain realm of reality. It's about keeping humble. From Alexander the Grammarian, not to leap on mistakes or captiously interrupt when anyone makes an error of vocabulary, syntax, or pronunciation, but neatly to introduce the correct form of that particular expression by way of answer, confirmation, or discussion of the matter itself rather than its phrasing, or by some other felicitous prompting. This is something I've learned from studying languages. I speak 5 languages, and there is nothing more discouraging than when someone goes, actually, it's this, not that, as opposed that gives some sort of superiority to the other person in correcting you like that. Whereas merely you can repeat the correct pronunciation to someone in your response, and they can learn that way without such pedantic corrections. And also, the correction of someone's grammar does not denote that you somehow have a better logical argument than them. And a lot of this is wrapped up in linguistic elitism, which Marcus cuts through straight here, and he's learned from one of his tutors, that it's not about the decorative beauty of your language, but rather the substance of what you're actually saying that matters. He's not saying that using correct speech does not matter, but to do it in a way that's respectful and doesn't put people off, because no one likes a grammar Nazi. From Fronto, to understand the effect of suspicion, caprice, and hypocrisy in the exercise of absolute rule, and that for the most part, these people we call patricians are somewhat short of human affection. This is very important to Marcus because he is in the exercise of absolute rule here. So if he is suspicious, then he will be paranoid of people around him plotting, and he will have people arrested and executed, such as Nero did. If he's capricious, if he acts on every whim that he feels like doing, he will fuck everyone in sight, and he will do the most balmy stuff like Caligula did. And if he's hypocritical, if he says one thing and practices another, then he loses his credibility as a ruler. And he also realizes that the patricians, is what the Romans called the nobilities, are quite lacking in empathy for other people. And he needs to be aware of this because these are the people who are in his imperial court. From Alexander the Platonist, rarely, and never without essential cause, to say or write to anyone that I am too busy, nor to use a similar excuse advancing pressure of circumstances, in constant avoidance of the proprieties inherent in our relations to our fellows and contemporaries. Yes, I think there is no shortage of time, and in another series I will talk about Seneca, who writes a brilliant essay on the shortness of life, but one of the best quotes from that is that it is not that life is so short, it's that we waste so much of it. And it's not really true that we are too busy to do something. It is that we do not want to. Or by our very nature, we want to do something else. Because by saying yes to one thing, you are saying no to others. Our attention can only look at certain things. It is not that you are too busy, it's that you have taken a decision not to engage in something or not to communicate with someone. Because if you truly wanted to, you can make time. That comes at the cost of other things, but that's a choice you have to make. From Catullus, not to spurn a friend's criticism, even if it may be an unreasonable complaint, but try to restore his usual feelings, to speak of one's teachers with wholehearted gratitude, as is recorded of Domitius and Athenodotus, and a genuine love for children. I think our friends are often can be our harshest critics. Not in the sense that they are constantly critical of us, but their criticism can bite the strongest because they know us the best. And so we shouldn't be dismissive if the people closest to us are trying to tell us something. And again, he's exercising gratitude here to the people who have educated him. From Severus, love of family, love of truth, love of justice. To have come by his help to understand Phrysia, Helvis, Vidius, Cato, Dio, Brutus. These are previous Stoic philosophers. To have conceived the idea of a constitution, a commonwealth based on equality and freedom of speech, and of a monarchy which values above all the liberty of the subject. From him too, a constant and vigorous respect for philosophy. So this is an interesting thing here because Marcus effectively embodies what Plato imagined as the philosopher king. In the Republic, Plato does not imagine that the ideal system of government is democracy, but rather that of the philosopher king. So this is a benevolent dictator, someone with absolute power, but who is wise and will execute his power in the best interests of the people. And he takes every decision asking the question, is this in the benefit of the people? And it seems paradoxical talking here about equality and freedom of speech in a system of government where one man has absolute rule. But the Stoics don't see this as a contradiction because they view all humans as fundamentally part of the same collective as part of humanity. They see it as fate has bestowed on some people that they are confounded to a certain role. Some people were born to be a slave. It is not that they are less of a person, but that's their duty to carry out. And yeah, it's not considered a contradiction. They are equal in spirit, even if physically they may not be equal. Constant and vigorous respect for philosophy, beneficence, unstinting generosity, optimism, his confidence in the affection of his friends, his frankness with those who he met with censure, and open likes and dislikes, so that his friends did not need to guess at his wishes. So again, Marcus here is talking about the merits of plain speaking. If you don't like something, say so. If you do like something, say as well. From Maximus, self-mastery, immune to any passing whim, good cheer in all circumstances, including illness, a nice balance of character, both gentle and dignified. So self-mastery, we're looking at that principle again of mastering your emotions and not giving into your impulses. And don't just doing whatever random thing occurs to you. Being cheerful in all circumstances, that's a choice. One of my favourite quotes is from the chef Marco Pierre White, talking about making Gordon Ramsay cry. He says, "I did not make Gordon cry. He made himself cry. That was his choice to cry." And I do think that is true in that you do not have control over how events happen. But what you do have a choice in is how you respond to those events. And you can just choose to be happy. It might be the difficult thing to do in a certain circumstance, but I think you can overrule it. And here he talks about illness. Illness is a normal part of life. Everyone gets ill. There's no point complaining about it. Do what you have to do. Go to the doctor, take your medicine, do what the doctor says, rest. But there's no point complaining about it. Complaining isn't going to make you feel better. So maintaining that good humour, I think, is a very powerful tool when faced with adversity. An uncomplaining energy for what needs to be done. So this is duty. Marcus didn't want to be emperor, but he took up his responsibility and he did not abdicate that responsibility. He took up his duty as was required and fulfilled it. The trust he inspired in everyone, that he meant what he said and was well intentioned in all that he did. So he's looking at taking all actions that he does and thinking about how they benefit other people. Proof against surprise or panic, in nothing either hurried or hesitant. Never short of resource, never downcast or cringing, or on the other hand angry or suspicious, generosity in good works, and a forgiving and truthful nature. I think this sums up by balance. If you're able to do things as and when they should be done in the correct way, there's no need to rush things. There's also no need to take a convoluted time to do it. Things should take exactly as long as they should take, and don't give in to being overly elated by good fortune or being fear-stricken by bad fortune. The impression he gave of undeviating rectitude as a path chosen rather than enforced. The fact that no one would ever have thought himself belittled by him or presumed to consider himself superior to him, and a pleasant humour. This reminds me of a beautiful quote from Rudyard Kipling, which is, "If you can walk with kings, nor lose the common touch." I think it's a brilliant duplicity of man to be able to do both of these things and to socialize with all people from all walks of life and not bring into it a chip on your shoulder that you're playing some kind of social game where you make people feel below you, or equally where you put yourself down and feel like you're not worthy to talk to them. Being able to keep that balance, I think, it's a very admirable trait. So the final part of book 1 is the most extensive part, which is finally he's thanking his adoptive father, which is Antoninus Pius, the previous emperor. "From my adoptive father, gentleness and an immovable adherence to decisions made after full consideration." So I think here, once you have fully deliberated on an action and you've decided that it's the right thing to do, you should commit to it, to its full completion. This means no half measures. If something requires more effort, give it more effort, but give it the full attention that it deserves and see it through to completion. No vain taste for so-called honours, stamina and perseverance. This is when, as emperor, you're being bestowed with every title and honour under the sun. You have 25 names and you're considered a deity in this and that subcult. So to be able to put those aside and take no interest in them is vital to be a good emperor. And stamina and perseverance, being able to keep up with the demands of ruling and seeing things to completion. A ready ear for anyone with any proposal for the common good. There is no monopoly on good ideas. You can find good ideas in all walks of life and any discipline, in people of all abilities. You just merely need to look hard enough. And I think we're far too quick to dismiss others, throw the baby out with the bathwater just because we don't like someone or we don't agree 100% with what they're saying. But I would argue that you can always find some gem in what someone else is saying. Sometimes you have to look harder in some cases rather than others, but you can find something there if the person has good intentions for the common good. To reward impartially, giving everyone their due, experience of where to tighten, where to relax. Yes, if you can give reward to people for their work without showing favoritism, I think that's a key tenet of leadership. If you start to show favoritism, you will create an environment of resentment, and people want to be recognized for their work. And also, there's a time for being serious and there's a time for kicking back and relaxing. And that involves not taking yourself too seriously. Putting a stop to homosexual love of young men. Now, this one could be misunderstood, and you think, was Marcus Aurelius a raging homophobe? The general Roman attitude to homosexuality was that you can have sex with men and that was fine as long as you weren't the receiver. If you were the feminine one, that in the homosexual act, then that was considered unmanly. But other than that, it was largely tolerated. But that's by the by. What Marcus in particular here is referring to Hadrian. Now, it's funny because Hadrian admired Marcus quite a lot. That's why he made Antonius adopt him as a future heir. But it seems Marcus didn't really have much respect for Hadrian. He doesn't really mention him in Meditations at all. But it turns out Hadrian was a bit of a sexual deviant, and he engaged in quite a predatory sexual relationship with a lot of young teenage boys, and Marcus seems to have escaped that. But he's grateful that Antonius did not engage in that same predatory behaviour. A common courtesy, excusing his court from constant attendance at dinner with him and the obligation to accompany him out of town. And those kept away by some other commitment always found him no different towards them. He's saying that Antonius really acknowledged the practicalities of ruling, that people should not have to constantly show their faces to the emperor to show that they're doing good work. There's a lot of bullshit associated with presenteeism and the idea that if people can see me, then I must be doing good work. And so to be able to see through that facade, I think is quite a mark of the wisdom of Antoninus and subsequently Marcus to recognize that trait in him. Focused and persistent in deliberation in council, never satisfied with first impressions and leaving a question prematurely. Things aren't what they seem, and our instincts are to jump to the first conclusion that we find, the first plausible explanation for something. But things are very rarely as simple as they appear to be in that case. The concern to keep his friends, with no extremes of surfeit or favoritism, his own master in all things, and serene with it. I think trying to avoid favoritism is a pretty vital skill as emperor when you have the capacity to reward people an unlimited amount. You have the ability to create unrivaled jealousy between people. Foresight for the longer issues and unfussy control of the least detail. I don't know if this is a flaw of our democratic systems, but many politicians today operate in the thinking of election cycles. And so no plans are made beyond 4 to 5 years. And when you're trying to carve out the destiny of a civilization, it's very hard to do that on a 4 to 5 year plan. And having the long-term vision to make difficult decisions now for the benefit of future generations, I feel like that's something missing in today's political discourse, where things are done which are expedient rather than necessary for the future. And you can think about how grand infrastructure projects are put on delay now, and people just keep kicking the can down the road, even though we know that eventually these things will benefit us, or probably they won't benefit us, but they'll benefit our children. We see no need to do it. And yet you also see that in architecture. It's seen as wasteful to produce beautiful buildings because apparently they cost more to produce. And yet such buildings are actually cheaper because you don't build them again. People like them, and so they keep them. And so it's an investment in the future by building something beautiful. But selling something as beautiful in a shareholder meeting is not going to get approval for construction. This part about not being concerned with the least detail. If things don't matter, you don't need to know about them and you don't need to oversee them. This is something about micromanaging, and the devil is in the details sometimes, and you do need to understand the intricacies of something, but only if it's an important thing. Not everything requires understanding of the minute details. You can leave someone else to do that for you. The check he put in his reign on acclamations and all forms of flattery, his constant watch on the needs of the empire, his stewardship of its resources, and its tolerance of some people's criticism in this area. So again, it's going back to that duty and the sense of duty towards doing good for the empire. Being emperor is not a post for the emperor, it's a post for the empire. You are a public servant and it is your job to do good. It's not your task to get richer or enjoy it. No superstitious fear of the gods, nor with men any populism or obsequious courting of the mob, but a sober steadfastness in all things, and nowhere any vulgar or newfangled taste. So this goes back to talking about doing what is necessary, not what is popular. As a leader, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions and people will hate you for it, but you have to believe that in your judgment, you are doing something because it is in the best interests of everyone. And populists may offer easy solutions to magically solve everyone's problems, but things are very rarely so simple. And actual leadership involves taking difficult decisions, which won't always be popular, and you have to be immune to those kinds of criticisms. And it's interesting about no superstitious fear of the gods, because I do believe Marcus believed in a god of sorts. He doesn't really talk much on religious belief, but he doesn't advocate for mysticism or spending your time praying to the gods to fix things for you. And so he's learned from Antoninus to not be irrational or superstitious. And with no vulgar or newfangled taste, I think that's another dig at Hadrian, who was a bit of a sexual deviant. In those things which conduce to the comforts of life, and here fortune gave him plenty, to enjoy them without pride or apology either. So no routine acceptance of their presence or regret in their absence. I think there's no shame in being wealthy, but equally there's no shame in being poor. And you can appreciate things that you have currently, but equally you should not be detached to them. I today have had a lovely glass of wine of Brunello di Montalcino. It's a wonderful wine, and I should enjoy that whilst I have the opportunity to do so. If tomorrow all I have to drink is water, I should equally be grateful with that. The fact that no one would describe him as a fraud or an impostor or a pedant, but rather as a man of mellow wisdom and mature experience, beyond flattery, able to take charge of his own and others' affairs. So you can see Marcus really admires this humility which Antoninus Pius exercises, and he clearly takes it to heart with in his own reign, where he tries to share power with Lucius Verus, tries to avoid the vain entrapment of seeing himself as a god or infallible. Further, his high regard for genuine philosophers. For the other sort, he had no hard words, but easily saw through them. I think this talks to the Stoics' genuine appreciation for people who walk the walk rather than talk the talk. I think there's the philosophers who spend their time in glorified mental masturbation and dress up their ideas in incredibly complex and incomprehensible structures. And then what are you supposed to do with that? The Stoics kind of saw through these people and didn't humour them. Sociability too, and a sense of humour, not taken to success. Again, it's about this idea of moderation here. He talks about sensible care of his own body, neither vain nor valetudinarian, but not neglectful either, so that his own attention to himself left very little need for doctors, doses, or applications. It's good to keep in shape, neither be a slob nor a obsessive gym rat. If all you live to do is exercise, there's more to life than just going to the gym. Going to the gym is not an achievement in and of itself. Being fit is merely the preservation of your body and putting you in a state where you are then able to do other things. It is a means to an end, but it's not the end in itself. And so if you're neglecting your body, then you are putting obstacles in your way to doing your life's work. And I think this is probably perhaps where people go to one extreme or the other. They either neglect their health to such an extent that they hit an early grave, or they don't have any energy for anything else, or they become so obsessive with it and over optimizing every aspect of their nutrition and their fitness routine that they've totally missed the woods for the trees, and they've become so fixated on fitness that they don't do anything else. And with humor here, there's a time for having a laugh, but it doesn't mean that you should treat everything as a joke, but you can't take yourself too seriously all the time either. More importantly, his readiness to defer ungrudgingly to those with some ability. It might be in literary expression or the study of laws or customs in any other subject, and to give them his own active support to reach acknowledged eminence in their own specialities. So this is deference to experts. As a leader, you are not the most knowledgeable on any topic, but what you can do is you can recognize the expertise of others and take advantage of that. And Marcus recognizes this, as did his adoptive father, Antonius Pius. By giving way to that expertise, you can use their wisdom to serve the people in the best way. Acting always in accordance with tradition, yet not making the preservation of tradition an overt aim. Further, no liking for change and chance, but a settled habit in the same places and the same practices. This is quite a difficult balance to make, but he's recognizing the traits here that Antonius showed for acting in tradition, but not being a slave to it either. Many traditions we have today, we don't really know why they're still here, and we think we should get rid of them. There's the principle of Chesterton's fence. This is the idea that you're walking through a field and suddenly you come across a fence, and your instinct may be, this is a stupid bloody fence, it's just in my way, let's just knock it down. But really the first thing you should do is assume that someone put up this fence for a reason, and perhaps you should find out the reason why they put the fence up, and then think about taking it down if you realize, okay, the reason they put it up no longer applies, we can take it down. Or actually, there's still a good reason for this fence being here, and let's keep it. But often we're quick to dismiss traditions that we don't understand, and we're dismissive of our ancestors. And yet, quite often, there was a very good reason behind why certain traditions came to be the way they did. That's not to say that change should never occur. And here, clearly, Marcus says that Antoninus recognized the time for when change should happen. But he doesn't believe in tradition for the sake of tradition, of, oh, we've always done things like that, so we should always do it like that. Nor does he believe in change for the sake of change, in that we can just, whatever new shiny thing we've found to do, let's do that. It's a balance between the two. To resume instantly after attacks of migraine, fresh again and vigorous for his usual work. When you're ill, you should take rest. Rest is a vital part of recovery. Even the Stoics recognized this. They would not be some overbearing YouTube fitness motivator saying just do it anyway. They recognize when it's time to take rest, you should take your rest and then come back to your duties with full strength. Because ultimately, that's how you can be of the most service. If you are in better health, you are more used to your fellow humans. Not to keep many matters secret to himself, only a very few exceptional cases, and those solely of state concern. It's incredibly exhausting to live in a secretive way because you have to keep a mask up to people. The Stoics believed that you should live in such a manner as though if someone were observing you all the time, you would have no shame in explaining to them what you do. And so clearly the matters of secrecy here are only for the case of state security and not for saving the reputation of an individual. Sense and moderation in such things as the provision of shows, contracting of public works, doles and distributions, the acts of a man with an eye for precisely what needs to be done, not the glory of its doing. This reminds me of a quote from the Roman poet Juvenal from the early 2nd century, where he talks about bread and circuses. It's a short passage, so I'll read it out. Already long ago, from when we sold our vote to no man, the people have abdicated our duties. For the people, who once upon a time handed out military command, high civil office, legions, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for just two things: bread and circuses. So the bread refers to the free distribution of wheat from the state to the people. So the citizens of Rome would receive a corn dole. They would receive free food, basically. And the circuses was the chariot races and the gladiatorial games, which were put on by the state as public entertainment. And so Juvenal kind of decried the brain rot that had gone on in the public, where they just became addicted to distractions. They wanted free shit and they wanted entertainment, and that's all they cared about. Now, Marcus here, he recognizes the purpose of public celebration and giving entertainment to the people, but not exceedingly so to the point where it's all they get. People who are continuously distracted are an ignorant people. I guess today it would be the equivalent of the welfare state plus reality TV and sports all rolled into one to sum up bread and circuses. He was not one to bathe at all hours. He had no urge to build houses. He was not particular about food, the material and colour of his clothes, or youthful beauty in his slaves. The fact that his dress came from Lorium, sent up from his country house there, the many details of his way of life at Lunuvium. So he was living a simple life and was not dedicating it all to leisure. You can take care of your appearance without being excessively obsessed about getting your hair cut every 3 days or trying to wear the latest designer clothing. And you can maintain good hygiene without spending 6 hours on sauna routine or being overly vain. How he handled the apologetic customs officer in Tusculum and all such modes of behaviour. Nothing about him was harsh, relentless, or impetuous, and you would never say of him that he broke out a sweat. But everything was allotted its own time and fought, as by a man of leisure. His way was unhurried, organised, vigorous, consistent in all. I love this idea of not seeming to break up a sweat and not being rushed about. First of all, because it creates a stability. And in leaders, you need calm leadership. You can't have someone who's frantic and running here and there, reacting to the latest thing. They need to be calm. And it reminds me of the Italian phrase sprezzatura, which is the principle of making everything you do seem effortless. There's grace in making an effort, but not showing other people that you made an effort, because it encourages a humility. There's a tendency these days to brag about how hard you work. And there's no need to do so about your inputs, because your outputs will speak for themselves. And so boasting about how much you input will not change how much your output is. What is recorded of Socrates would apply to him too, that he could regulate abstinence and enjoyment where many people are too weak-willed to abstain or enjoy too indulgently. This is where the Stoic principle of temperance comes in. They did not believe that you should abstain for things totally. They believed that there was a right time for everything, for sex, for enjoying food, enjoying wine, etc., but in a reasonable amount. And they didn't advocate abstaining or excess, because neither of those are a healthy thing to do. If you think of the extreme ends of food, you can either be an anorexic or you can be obese. And neither of those things are admirable. One has restrained themselves too much. The other has had no restraint. In the same way that going monk mode and getting rid of any physical intimacy is not a healthy way to live. Neither is having any control over your sexual urges. And the same with alcohol. I always find this interesting. A lot of people now quit alcohol. We all know alcohol is bad for us. And, some people might take the health conscious decision to quit it entirely. They decide that there's no good amount. But again, it comes back to self-regulation and discipline. As an adult with agency, you should be able to stop yourself from having 15 drinks and getting blackout drunk. It is possible to enjoy something without taking it to its excess. That's the definition of self-mastery, because someone who has simply eliminated the choice, they've not exercised any self-control there, because the implication is that if they were put in that scenario, that they would just act uncontrollably if given the opportunity. Strength of character and endurance or sobriety, as the case may be, signifies the man of full and indomitable spirit, as was shown by Maximus in his illness. Our character is the only thing we can take with us, and life has its ups and downs, and whilst your body can be weak, your character can still be strong in the face of poor health. And by showing good spirit in poor health, you can maintain a dignity. So that's quite a beefy passage there, where Marcus states all the things that he's grateful for his adopted father, Antoninus. And clearly you can see that Antoninus had one of the biggest impacts on him, that he wrote such a long passage for him. We're on the last 2 pages here, so if you've stayed this long with me, we've not got long to go. From the gods, to have had good grandparents, good parents, a good sister, good teachers, good family, relatives and friends, almost everything, and that I did not blunder into offending any of them, and even though I had the sort of disposition which might indeed have resulted in some such offence, given the occasion, it was the grace of the gods that no set of circumstances likely to show me up ever arose. So Marcus here is conscious of his temper, and this is something that he addresses in the book quite a lot, that he tries to regulate his anger because he knows that someone in his position, if he loses it to anger, he could kill anyone he wants. This is something he tries to work on constantly, and he's grateful for the impact of all the people in his life. This goes on to the principle that there is no such thing as a self-made man. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants. We benefit from the people around us and the people who came before us, and we should be grateful of that. That I was not brought up any longer than I was with my grandfather's mistress, and I kept my innocence, leaving sexual experience to the proper time, and indeed somewhat beyond it. I think Marcus here is expressing gratitude that he restrained himself from being lustful, especially when in his position he had the sexual temptation around him at all times, and he waited until he was married. That I came under a ruler and a father who was to strip me of all conceit and bring me to realize that it is possible to live in a palace without feeling the need for bodyguards or fancy uniforms, candelabra, statues, or the other trappings of such like pomp, but that one can reduce oneself very close to the station of a private citizen and not thereby lose any dignity or vigour in the conduct of a ruler's responsibility for the common good. He keeps emphasising this humility, even though he's in this position where he is literally a god. He is the ruler of the most powerful civilization of its time, and he has no restraints, and yet still he cuts out the bullshit. He doesn't believe the need to indulge in these pretentious rituals which are associated with being the emperor. He can still live a simple life in the palace. That I was blessed with a brother whose character could spur me to care for myself, and whose respect and affection were likewise a source of joy to me. That my children were not born short of intelligence or physically deformed. This is an interesting one because arguably Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, who eventually would succeed him as emperor, was one of the worst emperors that Rome ever saw. Perhaps maybe he wasn't short of intelligence, he was merely short of self-control. I need to read a bit more about Commodus, to be honest. And even still, he's showing gratitude for the fact that his surviving children were not physically deformed. He could here bemoan the cruelty of the gods that he had 8 children that died either in childbirth or at a very young age due to poor health. But he doesn't. He instead focuses on the positive here, the gratitude that he had 6 children that survived. That I did not make further progress in rhetoric, poetry, and the other pursuits in which I could well have been absorbed if I had felt this my right path. He talks here about not self-indulging in literature. As much as he loved it, he knows that it wasn't his purpose in life, and his purpose in life wasn't to sit around academics and self-congratulating each other on, oh, wasn't that a beautiful piece you wrote there? Wasn't that a witty linguistic structure you used? His role was to do good and serve his fellow man, and he knows this. And he probably regrets it deep down that he couldn't self-indulge in it, but he knows it wasn't what he was born to do. That I was quick to raise my tutors to the public office, which I thought they desired, and did not put them off, in view of their youth with promises for the future. That I came to know Apollonius, Rusticus, and Maximus. It's clear that tutors had a strong influence on him, and they came to influence his worldview as they taught him the ways of philosophy and statehood. That I acquired a clear and constant picture of what is meant by the life according to nature, so that with regard to their gods, their communications from that world, their help and their inspiration, nothing now prevents me living the life of nature. My falling somewhat short still is due to my own fault and my failure to observe the promptings, not to say the instructions of the gods. So here Marcus is taking responsibility for his actions and his life, and he doesn't blame the gods. He blames himself for not living up to the expectations of the god. And this is a theme throughout Meditations, where Marcus talks about living in accordance with nature, i.e., in accordance with God. And so he acknowledges his own shortcomings in following their instructions here. That my body has held out so far in a life such as mine, that I never touched a benedicta, and that later experience of a sexual passion left me cured. He's exercising gratitude here for his body holding out for as long as it does, and yet he's plagued by constant poor health throughout his life, yet he's still here. He does not bemoan it. He doesn't complain about having this poor health. He's grateful that his body has survived as long as it has. And also that he's held out against the urge to give in to lust. That though I was often angry with Rusticus, my behaviour never went to the point of regret. That my mother, fated to die young, nevertheless lived her last years with me. So here he's grateful that his anger was never excessive, and that even though his mother died young, that he's grateful that she lived. He doesn't focus on the fact that she died young. He focused on the fact that she got to live her last years with him. So you can see this optimistic outlook that he has on things, which I think feeds into his humility, the fact that he's so grateful. That whenever I wanted to help someone in poverty or some other need, I was never told that there was no source of affordable money, and that I myself never fell into similar want of financial assistance from another. So he's grateful for all this wealth that he's given to himself. He doesn't see it as a birthright or something that's due because he was born to be emperor. No, he sees it as a blessing, but he sees it as one that means that he can use to help other people who need it. So he's grateful for it. That my wife is as she is, so submissive, loving, and unaffective, and that I found no lack of suitable tutors for my children. Marcus was said to hold great affection for his wife, and he even built an extensive mausoleum for Faustina, his wife. And there's some dubious sources in the Historia Augusta about infidelity by Faustina, but I don't really know about the evidence to suggest. It seems like they had a loving marriage, and Marcus held great affection for her. That I was given help through dreams, especially how to avoid spitting blood and bouts of dizziness, and the response of the oracle at Catea, just as you use yourself. that for all my love of philosophy, I did not fall in with any sophist, or devote my time to the analysis of literature or logic, or busy myself with cosmic speculation. All these things need the helps of God's and fortune's favour. So finally, he's expressing gratitude that whilst he did dedicate a lot of his time to reading philosophy, he did not waste it on the sophist. Now, the sophists are like that irritating law student you meet who claims that they can make a convincing argument for anything. The sophists would construct these elaborate arguments where they would play on words and try and get you to trip on a structure. And so they didn't argue any moral case, but they rather judged things based on the merit of its linguistic argument. And so they would make these grand speeches, often in legal cases, to try and convince a crowd. But they had no moral compass one way or the other. And so Marcus is expressing gratitude that he didn't fall for these people. And so that concludes book 1. So you can see that he expressed so much gratitude to the people in his life. This is someone who had total power and was a god. I have to keep saying it because it really is remarkable how much self-restraint he demonstrated. And I think so much of it comes from the fact that he was aware that he was in this privileged position because he benefited from the people around him who gave him so much. I think we'll leave that there for today. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like and hit the subscribe button, and look forward to future episodes where we will take great wisdom from great books. See you soon.